Welcome to another episode of Non-Toxic Conversations. I'm Sam with Balanced Friends, and today we have a wonderful guest, Caley, here with us. I feel like any introduction that I give will not do justice, so I really just want to hand over the floor to you, Caley, and you can just fill us in on everything that you do and the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys. I was so excited to get a message from you and just learn more about what you and Alyssa do. So thank you so much. And I love talking about all of these things. So we kind of briefly went over some stuff that I'm interested in, and I could go so many different directions, but I'm just going to jump in and we'll see where this goes. But yeah, I grew up in a super small town in Iowa. I graduated with 48 people. I castrated pigs as a child with my best friend, on a farm. And we would walk beans, which means we would literally walk the fields and pull out the weeds together. This was the 90s. So it was before Roundup was huge, which is so interesting because that's a big passion in my life too, is just really exposing how bad these pesticides are. And I do a lot of work in the area with that. But yeah, I grew up just outside, and we didn't have a lot of money. So my mom, she canned a lot of stuff, and there really wasn't a focus on health, or I didn't learn about food being good or bad or anything like that. But I did kind of have a slew of problems, in high school, I at one point just, became overweight. I ate like shit. I had dermatitis. I had a ton of gut issues. And this was just my normal life. I also then went to college, decided I'm going to get out of this small town. And I drank a lot, like everyone did there, partied all the time at college. And I just, didn't really love my body. I treated it so poorly. Eating disorders developed. I feel like this is such a typical story among people like myself, So
I feel like we already have so much in common already in the fact that
really,
both Alyssa, my business partner and co-owner of Balanced Friends, my best friend, we both grew up in small country towns as well. No access to any type of holistic health. There was no grow up knowing about health. It wasn't until later on,
right?
That we went off to college. We drank all the booze, ate all the junk. We ate McDonald's. We didn't know.
Oh my God, bags of Doritos.
Yes. So I totally understand that.
I love that too. Yeah, it makes me sad, but also I'm not really the type of person to have regrets. But it was I was trying so hard to not be fat, basically. And I didn't know that it was literally just the shitty food, the low fat, a ton of artificial sweeteners. I was just living off of crap.
Right.
And I'm sure you know that feeling too. I think that's why we're so passionate about it, because then when I got to a point in my life, really, I got into CrossFit years ago. That was what kind of started this ball rolling. I'm not a CrossFitter anymore, but they were oh, eat paleo. Do you remember that?
Hey, what's paleo? Let me go look that up. And
right. And so I was still kind of in that mindset, what should I be eating to lose weight? And then as soon as I started eating whole foods, and then we moved out to Colorado, there was organic food. I didn't even know that was a thing until I moved out here, and yeah, it just completely changed my life. I used to have chronic UTIs, then I'd be on antibiotic after antibiotic, my gut just always felt like crap. And yeah, I just started eating real food and lifted some weights. And then I just saw how I lost weight, my health problems started to go away. And so I was kind of oh, we're really onto something here,
It spirals from there, honestly. Then you start learning about toxins, and then it really can go down all these different rabbit holes. And I think it's all by design, because there's so many different layers.
Oh, for sure.
So, but everybody's journey is similar in a way, but also
Yeah.
very different. But it's like once your eyes are opened, you can't
Yes.
not know what you've learned. And
No. And then I worked in the organic food industry for a while. So that really changed my mindset around things. And I was already eating organic at that point. I had just, I think my daughter was one, my oldest. So she was little. And I met this woman who started, so I'm pretty close to Boulder, which is like, the mecca of natural food startups, basically. Like Justin's peanut butter came out of there. Like we met him, Bobo's bars. I don't know if you've seen that. Like they're all out of there. So I met this woman and she was starting a snack company. And so I went to work for her and it was a startup. So I like did everything. I got their organic certifications. I got their non-GMO certifications. I sourced their ingredients. But that was when I was like, oh, this is a pretty corrupt system, just like every other system. And at the end of the day, like I'm a huge advocate for organic, like less pesticides, less chemicals. But I also understand that everyone there is really trying to sell their company for billions.
right.
And that's just part of the game. So it's
Right.
like, I get that. So you kind of have to keep your head on a swivel, support who you want to support, and,
Yeah, because I was going to ask you also, I feel like there is some pushback where people are like, is buying organic actually worth it? Are you just paying more for something? And so what is your take on that?
I could talk about that forever because think you grew up in a small farming community, right? So I would start to be learning these things. And this was like 10 years ago. And I would like go back home and be like, you guys, like Roundup's really bad. And, they're just like, that's a scam. It's the same things they still tell me today. That's a scam. Like we have to feed the world. Dose matters. And so I've literally heard that for 10 years. And when you, to me, what is a safe dose of a pesticide that disrupts your hormones, that, ruins your gut? I don't want that, so that's, I don't care what you tell me. If I can make a choice and pick, not that, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
So,
same.
yeah, so I don't want that on my food. With the packaged food, like you can look into it. Organic doesn't allow so many chemicals. Is it perfect? No. Like if you buy these prepackaged snacks for your kids, like sometimes I still look at it and I'm like, this is still gross. Like we should be eating an apple or a
Right.
salami, but I'll buy the lesser evil popcorn bags and send those as snacks, because honestly, it's easier and
It's
it's
easier. And
convenient.
I feel like at least in this wellness space, when you start going down the more natural rabbit hole or way of living that we
Mhm.
love, you can very easily overcorrect. Like you
Uh-huh.
don't need to be perfect. Like you don't need to pick a
Right.
company apart because they're not perfect.
Right.
They're still allowing us to have a better option, like better, not best. And that's okay.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, because like to think about like how I was talking about growing up, I had eating disorders and things like that. Like I don't like that went away when I stopped obsessing about things and I was able to get to that point because I was feeding myself whole nutritious foods. So I just got to the point where I was like, I never want to obsess. Of course, we're going to pick healthy and I want organic, but I'm not also just going to be a psycho about it and then have my daughters watch that too,
Absolutely.
And like
Yeah.
we do live in this world. So we do have choices. And yeah, that's kind of my choice. But the
Also,
organic food, go ahead.
was just going to say, I've been in this line of work. I've been integrative health practitioner for 6, maybe 7 years now. And when we first started Balance Friends, there were not a lot of healthy companies to pick from. Honestly, there wasn't. But
Right.
I've seen a huge shift in the amount of organic and just better products that are
Mhm.
available to us now, way more than ever before.
Right.
And so I do think we're on a cusp of change
Yeah.
where more and more people are becoming educated about this and they are choosing the organic, the cleaner product
Right.
option.
Yes. And that's really what it's about. And I mean, think about it. Again, when we were younger, I you always hear like, look at the ingredients. I remember thinking that like, okay, I should look at the ingredients. There's 50 of them. Like, how could these all be bad for you? Well, they are. Like in most cases, they are. So yeah, there's definitely been an explosion of amazing products and brands. Now, are they all using these seed oils now? Like, yes, I see a lot of that. So there's always going to be something, but
It's really for sure.
yeah, I'm a huge advocate for organic though. I never won't be. And I think people forget like that movement was started like by these hippies like in the 70s who were just like, be nice to Mother Earth, and it's not that anymore. I wish it still was, honestly, but and it's become so political, which sucks. Like I've seen both sides. I grew up in small town Iowa and I've lived in Boulder, and I just wish it wasn't political because it does affect our children so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to talk to you. I know we've talked about the organic and how important it is. But I wanted to get into some of your other work that you do in the birthing space, because I think it's incredible. I think that there's a real need for it. So can you tell us a bit more about what you're doing in that space?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So I never in a million years dreamt that I'd be talking about birth, and that would be my number one passion. It truly was the biggest transformation in my life. It changed my life as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend. Like it was just such this huge transformation when I had a home birth myself with my third, that I was like, I will not stop talking about this until I see some sort of change, And if you look at things like 98% of women birth in institutions, birth in hospitals. And so that's really my mission, is just to change that number, because I think when you're a low risk, woman, birthing at home, birthing in your own environment and in your own peace is just the way it's supposed to be, honestly. So I had 2 hospital births. I kind of went down the path that every woman, you get pregnant for the first time and you're just like, this is what I do.
You're like, now what?
Yeah. Like,
okay, what?
Okay. And like, I grew up, I've never even been to the hospital. Like, I've never even had an injury, So I think that was kind of like, I was set up that way, like to kind of question it, because I was just like, why am I going to this place that I've never been? Like, I'm not sick. I don't have injuries to give birth. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind. But again, I didn't know any different. Like, I had my first daughter 9 years ago. Instagram was not what it is today. Like, I didn't even know that people were having home births. Could I have done more research? Yes. So I was like, I'm going to have a natural birth, Well, it didn't work out that way. So yeah, it's your first. And it's just like, God, if I would have known, like with first babies, you'll hear all the time, like, oh, her labor, it was awful. It was so long. It was 3 days long. And in the home birth world, like, that's normal. You know what I mean? Like, all know first births are really long, and it takes a lot of help from doulas and other women and wise women being like, okay, go back to bed. Like, just go back to bed, nourish yourself. Like, if every first time mom had a woman doing that, I feel like the interventions would be way less. Like, they wouldn't be at the hospital getting all these interventions,
I agree. I can totally relate as well, because with my first, very similar to you, I started out seeing a midwife at a hospital thinking, okay, this is like a nice bit of both worlds. I get a little bit of like, okay, this is good. Then every time I was there, I would get horrible anxiety. Like, I just felt like I didn't belong. And same as you, I grew up never going to the doctor. I don't know if it's because we were poor and we didn't have insurance. I don't know what the deal was, but I never was at a hospital.
Yes.
And so then I was going there regularly, and yes, I would get horrible anxiety. And then the whole topic of gestational diabetes came up for me. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, I am so healthy. And
Right.
I wanted to monitor it on my own. And I ended up having a faulty meter. I found out later. But I called the birth center here. I was like 30 weeks pregnant with my first. And
Right.
I decided, okay, no, if I stay in the medical system, she is going to tell me my baby's too big. I'll get pushed towards a
Induction.
C-section and
Yeah.
induction. And I could just see that coming because thankfully, you know, we did have the Instagram, a lot more information available.
Good.
I had my son, he's 4 now. So I
Aw.
felt like I had some time to prepare. I also was pregnant during the peak of COVID. So nobody was doing anything. I had all the time in the world to just like sit on my couch, read the books, like get the education. I
Good.
wasn't working full time because the world had just shut down. So
Right.
kind of a blessing in a way in that regard.
Yeah.
But I decided right in that moment, I could just see it unfolding before my eyes. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be victim to this. So I decided to go with our local birth center to
Good.
also use my husband as well,
Yep.
a doula. But yes, I pushed with my son for 8 hours. This is unmedicated. I pushed for 8 hours. It had to do with position but I had the support and
Yeah.
otherwise I would have had a C-section for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different avenues that the medical field will take to just intervene. And so that's why, you know, as soon as I learned all these things, gestational diabetes, you know, that's one of them. Then there's strep B. Like there's so many different areas for them to come in and say, you need to, and they scare you. It's all about fear, you know? And it still happens where they're telling women that their babies are too big, first time moms, like just the stress alone that they cause is just, it's hard for me to watch. And so, yeah.
And the timeline that they put on you is so stressful. So even with the birth, they let me, I say, go to 42 weeks. Both of my children came at boom, right at 42 weeks. Like I can't imagine if I would have stayed in the hospital, I absolutely would have been induced, and who knows what could happen from there. Because I mean, do you want to speak to kind of the cascade of events that we see in that region?
Yeah, I want to tell a quick story though regarding that, because all my babies were overdue too. Like the whole due date thing, it really is the first intervention. Like as soon as you put a woman on a clock, that's when all the problems come in. But with my second, this was when I was like, I hate this. Why am I coming back? You know, I think I was 41 and 5 with her, and I went in for the stress test. You know, they make you do that. And I was like having contractions on the monitor. And so then she took me into a room. They had to do another ultrasound. And she was like, you know, your fluid's getting low. Like, I think you should go check into the hospital. And I was just bawling, like, I'm not in labor. I don't want to go, you know? And so she was like, just go check in. The OB, my mom was with me, and I was like, okay. We literally escaped. I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not going. And the hospital was in Denver, and I live like 30 minutes south. So I just was like, we're leaving. So we just drove home. They're calling me. Where are you? Where are you? You know, it was like I was a teenager in trouble, and I would make my husband and my mom answer the phone and be like, oh, we're at home, you know, because they were just,
they were helping you. Like you said, like a teenager in trouble, as if you don't have a choice with what you do with your body, and that you are purposely putting your baby in danger. Like,
right. So I went home and labored until I was in active labor. And then we drove to the hospital. And I remember, like, I think I was at like 8 centimeters. Like the doctor was still there, and she came in, and I remember being like, sorry, like, why am I apologizing to you? But that's the feeling you get when you're, you know, in these hospitals. And so there was a couple of other things too, but my second daughter, after she was born, she was a little jaundiced. And so they kept making me like strap her on this black light and like put these goggles on her, like my brand new baby. And then they would keep coming in and checking and being like, put her back on the black light. And I was just like, we are out of here, and I will never come back. And I never did. And then I got pregnant, and I was like, I'm having my baby at home.
So tell us about your home birth.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent.
Oh.
But Yeah, so I found a local midwife. Like, this was when things were ramping up on social media, and I was like, I'm gonna have a home birth. I also knew an older woman, she's like 70 now, but she had her babies at home in Boulder. And yeah, as soon as you start out, when I went for my first appointment with this home birth midwife, it was at her house. Like, we just like sat in like one of her bedrooms, and at first you're kind of like, and then I was like, oh my God, this is like, it's so comfortable. It's so amazing. They ask you what you eat. I mean, do they do that in the OB clinic? No.
Will they even let you eat? Like,
Yeah, exactly. So it was just, they, they spend time with you. And
yeah.
so like, as soon as I started the prenatal care, I was just like, oh my God, what have I been doing? It was so different. This was my third. So I had never had an unmedicated birth with both my first two. I ended up getting an epidural with my second, you know? So I was just like, let's do this. And so I went into labor. I was overdue again. Like, there wasn't a lot of stress there. Like, they were just like, it's okay. Like, you can tell in the midwifery model, it's like they try not to stress the woman out,
Mhm.
Like, so instead of like, if I was at 40 weeks, they'd be like, we'll make an appointment like next week sometime, instead of being like, we need to get you in. You have to do a stress test, So it was just like a different mindset. But yeah, I had a great labor. I've always had really bad back labor. Now I know it's just kind of the positioning that my babies end up in, like, because I do a lot of doula work now. Back labor sucks. I never had a doula being like, you should get in sideline release or do Miles circuit or all of these things. But anyway, I had him in my bedroom at like 3 a.m. My husband was here, my mom was here. It was, I mean, I pushed him out, with the FER reflex kicked in, and like, I pulled him out. We didn't know if he was a he. It was a surprise. That was so
That was
fun.
both of mine. I waited. I said, if I'm going to do this unmedicated, I need like that big surprise at the end.
So fun. And it
Great.
was just like, yeah, I pulled him out of the water, and I was just like, oh my God, like it was seriously like a movie montage, like everything I'd been fighting with the girls and, the systems. And I was just like, oh my God, like, this is where I'm meant to be, like a mother to these babies, and like, listen to my intuition. And like, my life changed. And then you have your golden hour, like, in your bed. And my mom was like bringing me hot broth, and she had made like some butter braids that the neighbor girls sold, like, for the midwives. And like, you literally just sit there on the bed and talk. Like,
Yes.
it's just so,
So,
and then they weigh the baby, after I've nursed him for a while. And I was just like, this is what I've been missing out on. Like, you've got to be fucking kidding me,
it's amazing. And I think so many people feel so scared about like the fact that labor is going to hurt, but I can't describe it, or I guess the best way that I can describe it would be, you just really do slip off to some labor la la land.
Yeah.
Your body's just made to do it, and you just do
You
it.
surrender. You really, like, that's the key word I tell all my clients too. Like, it's just, you have to surrender. And that's like in motherhood, right? Like, constant surrender. Like, there's so many things. But at the heart of it too, like, we know what we're doing. We know how to give birth. I know when my baby doesn't feel well, or, I need to do something with them. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mama always knows.
Yeah.
And we mentioned Instagram. I want to say two things about that. Number one, yours is great. It's like you say all the things that everybody is thinking.
I do.
Might be too scared to say them. So
It's because I had a home birth, Sam. I just don't care anymore.
Love it so much. And then the other thing with Instagram, I feel like, or even just social media, or even the internet, is it can kind of work both ways. Sometimes like too much information is making moms feel guilty or making their choices harder in a way. But I think we shouldn't let that intimidate us. You just don't want to go to the doctor and do everything that they say without asking any questions.
Yes.
I think if you know that you're wanting a baby in the future, start doing some research now. So
Yes.
some of those big decisions are already kind of made up.
That's such a good point too, because I really feel like that's the shift too that like we as a culture need is for young women or maidens, you know, to really start doing this work before they get pregnant. Like, and that could go so many different directions. Like, and I'm sure you kind of grew up similar in this way, but it was like go to college, get a job, have a baby, go back to work, you know? And when my daughters get older, I'm going to for sure be like, do you want to be a mother? Do you want to have kids? Like, let's think about what sort of career you could have where you could take a break and be home with your babies and like really prioritize that, you know? So there's that aspect of it. But I think that kind of leads into the birth itself too. Like, do this research, realize there are other options. And I mean, honestly, it just relieves young women of trauma, you know, that they have to work through later in life again.
Yes.
So that's a great point. Like doing the research before you get there is just so important.
And can have those conversations when you can think a little bit more clearly and not so clouded with maybe the pregnancy hormones.
Yeah. And the fear.
There's a lot of like decisions to be made that people don't even realize. Like, do you want your baby to have the eye ointment? What are you going to do with the vaccines? What are you going to do with XYZ? Are you going to drink the glucola? Like people
Right.
just don't even know these are options. You do get to have a say
Yes.
in what happens to your body. And
Right.
deep down, you already know what feels right to you and have all this outside clutter that I feel like can take us make us a little disconnected with our mama intuition at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, you were asking me about interventions too. Like that's the thing with all of those things you were listing, like the glucola, like the strep B test, like, you know, people will fight back and be like, oh, it's not that bad for you. Or, oh, this is just how they have to test your glucose levels. And it's like, okay, but what information are you going to get from that? And what path is that going to lead you down? Like, that's the thing. And that's what I tell women. Like, it's not like I'm like, never drink that drink. It has flame retardant in it, which it does. But it's like, what's going to happen when you read these results and they're like, your blood sugar's high. So now you have to do X, Y, and Z. Baby's going to be at risk for this. Like, you're probably going to have to get induced. Like, that's the problem with everything. And in the home birth world, when they present you with, you know, the gestational diabetes test, not only are they not like, you have to do this, they're like, you have these options. So you could drink the organic grape juice, or for me, I just had them draw my A1C, you know, but it's true informed consent. So they say, this is why we do it. This is what's going to happen if you test this way or this way. Do you want to do it? No. I said no, you know, but they are licensed. So they had to have some sort of testing. So that's why I had them just draw my A1C. Easy peasy. That's it. It hasn't been, you know, super high, and off we went. But
I love that you just brought up the A1C, the hemoglobin A1C, because that is oftentimes not even on a pregnant woman's radar. That is an additional lab test that you should be asking for so that you have that information about your health going into your pregnancy.
right.
For anybody who feels like they don't have an option, just so you know, Balance Friends does offer an at-home lab test for hemoglobin A1C is one of the markers we can check just from the comfort of home. You don't need a doctor's note to get
That's
it.
so awesome.
And take control of that aspect of it.
Right.
Comfort of your home. Same goes with like vitamin D, I feel like is so important in pregnancy and fertility. And that also is oftentimes like an add-on lab test that you need to be asking.
Yeah. Do you guys do any MTHFR gene mutation or any of that?
As of right now, no, but I have MTHFR, so does Alyssa. It is so
Really?
important. So no, we don't at this time.
Did you know that before you got pregnant?
I didn't know that when I was pregnant, but I had suspicions that I may have it, and I was like, okay, I don't know either way, so I'm going to just go ahead and take extra
Good.
folate just in case. But even with extra folate and also my prenatal, which was a really good quality, third-party lab,
Right.
best of the best, I had all that knowledge, thankfully, ahead of time.
Yeah.
But even with those, doing those changes, Hudson, my son, was still born with a tongue tie, a lip tie. He had, a sacral dimple that, really could have been spina bifida if I didn't have those additional nutrients. And then because he was born with all those things, then my provider at the time was like, have you ever been actually tested?
Wow.
Like, no, I haven't. So then I got the test. And then, yes, I was. So then with my daughter Ruby having that knowledge, I was like, okay, now I'm going to take extra folate.
Methylated folate. That's awesome.
So I did, so that was helpful,
Yeah.
in these, but yeah, if you don't have that information about your health or you've never heard of it, then
I know. And that's like literally one smidget.
smidge of the journey.
Wow.
Crazy. So I mentioned the tongue and lip tie. You can only imagine what that was like with breastfeeding. It was very pinchy. It was painful. That was my firstborn. I'm thinking, okay, my
Hurts.
are bloody. I'm like, how am I even going to get through this? This is nuts. And so then I'm also a dental hygienist. So with my dental background, I was like, okay, let's go get them checked out. And
Good.
sure enough, tongue tie, lip tie, as soon as that was released, our breastfeeding journey was 1000% better.
Good.
But again, not all moms come from a dental hygiene background. Like, it would have been very easy
Mhm.
to give up. So I know you're also very passionate about breastfeeding.
Yes.
That's about that.
Yes, I would love to. I loved breastfeeding. I had one of my sons, well, I only have one son, but my third child had a lip and tongue tie too, and I did do a release. So my first two daughters didn't. I kind of went into the experience just being like, I'm absolutely going to breastfeed, like 100%. And I did, and it was amazing. Like, I loved it. My husband was actually gone a lot, like 2 months at a time, like right after I had my firstborn. So that really just like saved my postpartum experience. Like, so I am super passionate about women getting this chance and opportunity to connect and breastfeed their babies, because it is just so monumental in their healing, their postpartum healing, their connection with their babies, their connection with their community. And to think that women who have, issues with breastfeeding, like you were just talking about, and then they go into these pediatricians who have no background or knowledge of breastfeeding itself, and then they tell them, hey, look, just, fed is best. Here's some formula. They quit breastfeeding. They get depressed. I mean, I could talk about that all day, because you'll hear these different tropes from formula companies that they've been peddling since the 50s. And it makes me sad, and I'm super passionate about it, because I think women just need more support, and they need more wise women in their lives to help them. I was lucky my mother breastfed. It's not like that with a lot of women, and like, I've come across a lot of people, especially in this group I'm in, Radical Moms Union, who they were like the first woman to breastfeed in their family for 3 generations.
Wow.
And so, especially Black women. And so for them to have, these formula companies and people that only put their profits, above women, come in and give free formula samples and, advertise on Instagram, and then steal that away from women, like, it is a really big deal. And it is something that I'm super passionate about. So I could talk about that group all day, but breastfeeding is amazing. It's amazing for your mental health. It's been proven that way. You'll hear the opposite, on social media.
Also, it's really just all by design, because from what I was reading, it's also, you have to have that basically hormonal cascade that happens with breastfeeding to help with even your healing postpartum. It's because it helps the contraction.
Contract. Yep.
So I think it's all by design. It helps you to heal. I'm also very fortunate in the fact that my mother-in-law, she gave birth to both of her, my husband and his sister unmedicated. And he
Awesome.
also breastfed. So I had her in my corner. I'm very close with her. And so I just kept telling myself, like, again, if you have the wise women there, it's like, okay, if
So true.
I can do it. Like I can do this. But if I didn't have that, it would have been very easy to give up because breastfeeding, it really is like a full-time job. It is.
Yeah, it is. And you just have to get through. Like the beginning is
Yes.
tough. You're tired. You are so worn out from birth, especially with your first baby. So if you don't have the right people in your corner, just being like, first of all, it's not going to always be like this. Like, oh, if this hurts, let's try this. Like, don't stress yourself out also about like, oh, like, in the hospital, again, they're like 3 pee diapers by 10 o'clock and all of this. Like, that's,
it's so much.
yeah, that's a whole other thing. But if you let all of that go and just sleep when you can sleep and nurse your baby and like let go of all the stress of like, seriously, a lot of it comes from the hospital. That's what just hurts me,
And like I've seen this too. I read about it and then I've seen it happen to people that are close to me. But when your baby is born and maybe you had a medication, they come out, they weigh the baby, and baby is, going to be bigger. They're swollen.
Yes.
You know what I'm going to say.
I know what you're going to say. And it's true. And they're pumped up with all these fluids because mom's been in, she had Pitocin, then you had an epidural, then you're in labor forever because they gave you these drugs. So then they have to start pumping you with fluids. Well, guess what? Baby comes out, and I experienced this. So I'm passionate
about this intervention.
Right. So they're big. And then right away in the hospital, they start weighing them. Lost too much weight. So with my first, guess what I did? I'm scared. I just had a traumatic birth and failed. And then now you're telling me that my baby is losing too much weight. My milk hasn't come in yet. Well, of course it hasn't. It can take up to 4 days.
Right.
So then they were like, you should supplement. So I was like, okay. I didn't do formula, thank God. But I was like, do you have any like breast milk from a milk bank? So they gave me that. I did that for 1 day. What did that really help? But they were like, you need to go to the pediatrician tomorrow, like right when you get home. So it's the middle of winter. I'm like, I have to put clothes on my baby and bring them to the pediatrician. Like that is how this all starts. And then you're scared. And then you're like, okay, I'll just do formula. No, somehow I got through it because I was just like, I hate you guys. And I just kept nursing. And then my mom got there. She came and she kind of relieved the stress. Like, oh, she's fine.
It's
like, that's all I needed.
It's that support.
Yeah. I needed someone to be like, you're fine. Like, you got this. You can do this. And that's like what got me through. But yes, that happens all the time, the weight loss.
Yes.
And it doesn't in home birth because, first of all, they're not pumped up with fluids.
Right.
And then I think they come back 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And so it just wasn't like that constant, like, we're here for the checks.
I mean, it's also not great for like a full grown woman or man to be stepping on the scale every second either. Or like, how
much does your body change?
Yeah, it's not great. So, oh man, I go on and on so much, but I really just hope this conversation just helps to open the eyes of I hope it finds a person who needs it the most because it's hard being a mother and it's hard being you don't know what to do. And so
but it's also so amazing and we're so amazing. And I don't want women to feel that way. Like if there's a tug at all to be like, I want to do different, like you can find the right women to help you. Seriously.
Absolutely.
Because it's so amazing.
Can you tell us more on where we can find you? What's your Instagram name? Because I've been on it. I've seen it. I love it. But I'm like, what is the actual name?
Oh, yeah. So it's wild mama __. Like these are the times we live in. And I do a lot on Instagram. I have my own podcast where I'd love to talk to you. I love to hear women's stories, especially I just love to hear how they got to where they are and their stories of transformation. Like life is all about like embracing change and challenge and like getting through. And that goes back to birth. Like it was designed so perfectly as humans, as women, like we crave hard things, right?
And we
We
can,
crave overcoming things and helping others. And it's like our body literally does that for us.
if we let
You
it.
know, birth, breastfeeding, and like once you just feel it, just actually stop numbing out and feeling it, you're like, I can do anything. And so that's my Instagram handle. I have a podcast. I work with the Radical Moms Union to advocate for breastfeeding. And I'm just here to help other women and like reach out
What's
whenever.
the name of your podcast?
It's called Wild Mama.
Wild Mama.
All
Perfect.
Wild Mama.
I love it. And
Yes.
if somebody wants to work with you, where is the best place they can find you?
Yes, honestly, you can DM me on Instagram. I do have a website, a birth site where you can go on there and submit a form. And I always get back to people on there. There's a lot of information about the birth work that I do, including postpartum doula work and things like that. I love everything birth. So,
Well,
good
every mom
help.
would be so lucky to have you in their.
Oh, thank you. I love my mamas.
Yes. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on today, or?
I don't think so, but I'm excited to talk to you again for
Yeah.
sure. Thanks for reaching out. I could talk about so many things. So sorry if it was so chaotic.
No, I love it. This is how women talk. I swear. We're just like all over the place. That's how we are. I love
You're
it.
right.
I love to be that way.
You're right. Well, I love it. Thank you so much.
I love it. Thank you, Caley. Until next time.
Yeah.